Okay, there are no agenda adjustments tonight. Any comments from tonight from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on. OPM updates, Jen? All yours.
Would you like to present your slides or should I?
Yeah, I could start. Yeah. Crystal, I'm going to, for the combo presentation you had, if we could we'll skip this budget presentation. Crystal's fast forwarding over budget slides that I had updated the December 20th meeting. They'll be on our website, but I essentially just changed some of the slides relative to the budget adjustment. So for the first part of the meeting, I'll try not to slow down the average of the pace. But one of the items that we do need to discuss as a building committee in tandem with design and cost is certainly looking at the importance of a preferred design enrollment. These slides are similar to something that I had put together, and it's on our project website from a couple months ago. But there's a lot of numbers and not a lot of words. And my intent is not to ask you to do a deep dive on this, but I'd like to just explain what these slides are and ask that you join me in thinking about this over the next couple of weeks as we work towards a decision. So thanks, Crystal. There are some key questions we should be considering. How would an enrollment decision improve or limit our future ability to enroll students? How will enrollment scenarios impact your towns, specifically when it comes to seat allotments? How does expanding the district impact capacity? And what about the operating side of all this? What are the personnel needs that come with increased enrollment? This slide, this is a new slide. I didn't know what to expect when I asked for some help putting this together, but here's where all of your kids are in all of the shops we offer. And this chart to me is a reminder how regionalized vocational education, 60+ year experiment in this state, is still the least expensive option for giving kids in our small towns access to multiple career pathways. So there's nothing to jump off the page other than for each member who represents a community to say, these are the kids from my town, and here are the shops that they're in. And of course that adjusts every year, but you can see that there are many opportunities there. Thanks, Chris. We'll go back 2 slides, I think. And now we'll move on. Thank you. When I try to think about enrollment demand, I start by trying to create hypothetically, what do we think would be like the 100% satisfy every kid demand number? And so the way that I unpacked it myself was to say, what do we typically take for 9th graders? And what about this new town that's joining us? What do we think a new town will send? And we've had a historical waiting list of about 68 kids. So whatever number we might think the town of Marshfield will send, we don't have a lot of data on them, right? That would, in theory, increase a waiting list. So that's how I get that 88. I take the average waiting list and I add 20. If you think maybe 30 will come, we add 30. Now, every kid who's on a waiting list is statistically unlikely to actually come if we offered them. And so I consulted with our admissions folks and said, what do you think the percentage of kids on our waiting list, honestly, even if we were able to offer them a magical seat, maybe not all of them would say yes. So they assume maybe 10%. So I concluded that the maximum demand for a 9th grade class would be about 254. And if you multiply that as a gross number, you get a little over 1,000. But then the reality is that we have attrition. We don't graduate the same number of kids who come in grade 9. We do get a few more sophomores, but in general, this allowed me to create for myself a baseline of saying, okay, if we had something that could accommodate that number, when we have those moments of saying, I just want to accommodate every kid, even if reality smacks us in the face and we can't do that, I at least have a number in mind. So that exercise helped me look at that 100% actual demand. The next 2 slides are saying the exact same thing. They're both busy and I didn't like either one of them entirely, but what I've attempted to do here is to show you that if you look from left to right, you have the current enrollment of 670, and then you have the 750 enrollment that we dumped. We put that off the table for now, right? We know we could actually add more kids depending on what's designed. So you'll see as the numbers go from 670 all the way up, The color coding is to try to suggest to you that there was a 750 design that we did not prioritize. There's an 805 design in the lightest blue, then I added 5%, then I added 10%. Designers are not gonna recommend 10% because then we're just back to where we were. Where are we putting everybody? But it's possible. And then, of course, there's the 900 enrollment. Now, those numbers across the top, you might ask, well, what size freshman class could we bring in if we went with that number? And that's what the rest of this chart unpacks for you. So you can pick whatever column you want, as long as you compare it back to the now column, in order to see how that might increase capacity. Again, over time, we don't graduate the same number. So I'm using an attrition rate of about 3%. If you looked on the DESE website at our attrition rates for the last 5 years, it's averaging around that. So it's kind of boots on the ground knowledge, but then it's also, what did we actually report to the state? So there's no answer to this chart other than gathering info that you might find worthy of reflection. And the next slide does roughly the same thing, just in a different visual. The purple bar at the top is that 254. If we could accommodate every kid who'd want to come here. The current, so that would be the 175 and Marshfield and a waiting list. And then this is just another visual of showing you in color what that incoming freshman class might look like. And then the gray bars are the same numbers, just reading them from left to right, the attrition rates. So there's no right answer here, but this helps you scale. If you're thinking about enrollment, this might help assist with that scale. This chart attempts to answer the question, okay, what's another way of asking what percentage of this demand are we meeting? So this is another way of looking at the baseline. So the way I'm looking at it with that beige, light yellow bar across the top is that for the next 4 years, we're going to be the same size school. We can't grow much more than this. So how are we doing right now? We're going to have a new town in the district. They're going to send us some kids. We're going to have a waiting list that's probably going to grow as a result of us not being able to grow our bottom line number. So I would say to you 2 assumptions. If we have a community that brings us an additional 20 student demand, even if all of our demand stays the same, we're meeting about 74% of that capacity. If that one variable changes, the last 2 columns, and you look at the demand minus attrition column, maybe it slips down to about 69%. So once again, I'm looking in my own head for a baseline of saying, if I support this enrollment number, how is this enrollment number, put it casually, how's it going to help the waiting list? How's it going to help us? Are we actually going to be able to address a higher percentage of the demand? So this is now the rest is somewhat common sense. As the enrollment number gets bigger, so do the capacity numbers. To the point that you would eventually get to that 941 in that middle column, but you've got to get down into a larger enrollment. So this is not the good news about this presentation for the moment. This is not about cost. This is just meditating on, we've got an enrollment window, we've got an enrollment range to look at. And if you find yourself saying, how will this affect capacity? How can I tell people in my community that this will make it better? If that's a priority to you, this attempts to suggest some scale of how it might make it better and to what extent we can afford to do so. Oops, I said the word afford, I'm sorry. Forget I said that. Next slide, please. Okay, eye chart, save the copay, cover one eye, try the other. This chart, I can't do justice to this, but if I take you slowly from left to right, let's just use Abington. Abington has 139 students in our school as of the October 1 report. The way we apportion seats is based on the 8th grade, extract that, I'm sorry. It's the 139 represents the 8th grade population, not the population here. So there's 139 8th graders in Abington. If we had just the baseline like we do now, that's 11% of the seats that we would apportion to Abington in for the 9th grade class. Now, if we add in another community, Marshfield, we've got some Marshfield data. Look down the bottom, look in the lower left corner. Look at the size of Marshfield's 8th grade class. You see they are our largest community. So they will be apportioned seats. We've talked about this for a long time. So if you go back to Abington's line, that 11% share with the same size school we have becomes a 9% share. And then I added in the other factor, which is floating out here, which is what if we added another town? We know Pembroke's interested. Pembroke joining has nothing to do with MSBA. Now that share drops a little further. So you know the percentages with the same size school are going to drop. It's the size 10 foot and the size 8 shoe. So now we take it, we put hard numbers behind it. Now we'll go back to that next number, 19. Abington would be apportioned 19 seats. Okay, that's with 8 towns. Now watch that 19 as we go across and pressure test it. There's now, next year, we're gonna, if you, Crystal, put that cursor on the 16 if you don't mind. Thank you. Crystal, by the way, is doing that with the mouse in her lap in the distance. Very steady hand, thank you. So we're the same size school, we bring in Marshfield, Abington's allotment goes from 19 to 16. Okay, it was going to drop. Now let's pretend we've got Marshfield in the mix and we start, and we've got a bigger school. We've got 750, we've got 805. So you can see the enrollment numbers. Now you can see Abington's allotment share starts to recover. It starts to balance out. We're bringing in more communities, we're adding more capacity. So if you want to pick Abington's baseline of 19, and then say, well, their baseline is really going to be 16 because of Marshfield, you can then figure out where the rest of this chart goes. Abington's allotment recovers, that's the light green. That my attempt is to say, when you get around the light green column, now we're starting to say that an enrollment of 805 with a freshman class of 210, there's an allotment that mirrors similar to where Abington might have been used to. And then it grows. Again, just to be clear, with Marshfield joining next fall, it's that 670 column in the beige. That's the new normal. That is the new normal. We've got 9 towns with the same size school for 4 years. And I'll wrap it up with this to say that if that makes sense, then lather, rinse, repeat for the last 4 or 5 columns, which is if we brought in the town of Pembroke. I've added some Pembroke data at the bottom to show you how there might be a reapportionment. So when you find your community, again, a lot of it comes down, the goal isn't necessarily to make it even. We know that there are unused seats, but at least I know that it would be important to you to know where your community would or wouldn't be relative to an allotment. So is this a consideration? Well, it certainly is a consideration when you're also thinking about district expansion. So once again, this chart is better the day after. Put it in the fridge and have it for leftovers. You need to really look at it and figure out if there's something there that triggers you to ask more questions. So, but this does attempt to address, we're talking about an MSBA project, complex, multiple decisions, and we've also got districts around us that want in. It's an added layer of complexity for us to consider. Now, the school building committee doesn't necessarily make a decision on, Pembroke's joining, and that's a school committee, ultimately a school committee decision, but these duties overlap because it's this committee that's choosing an enrollment. I think I have one more slide, Crystal, and then, thank you. And this addresses that last guiding question that I put up there, which is, okay, we are not tone deaf to the fact that if we increase the size of the school, we're going to need additional personnel, operating costs with expanded enrollment. So my early estimates right now, using some inflation adjusted hiring people from fiscal 28 through 32, would be a combination of support personnel, the cafeteria, bus drivers, custodians, paras, et cetera, as well as teachers and administrators. And so those numbers at the bottom, again, I'll use the famous line, for comparative purposes only, but you can at least see the scale. Those are some rough estimates. So if you're looking at that, say, 3.1 million, that number does not mean there's 3.1 million of operating costs immediately. What it means is over the course of a 5-year period, as we bring in additional new 9th grade classes and we top off at the desired enrollment number, that's what we might have to factor in for operating costs. But I make a point to put in the lower left corner that this doesn't address any potential state aid. So so that's me saying, if we got not a penny of state aid to add hundreds of kids to this building, that entire cost would be passed along to our communities. That's highly unlikely to happen. Okay, so thank you for that. I'm happy to answer questions, but if you'd like to keep up with the pace, I'm happy to save them till later.
Tom, does that mean, do you think we can have a wait list by town? Like how many have wait listed by town?
Yes,
Due to the applications that came in?
yeah, do you mind if I?
Yeah, please.
This wasn't if Bob Mahoney asked this question, I just happened to have this. Let's see, this is from,
Okay, right.
this was not professional wrestling, no, you're right, it's not scripted here. Number of applications, let's see, I can tell you number of applications. 45 students applied from Abington, 6 applied from Cohasset, 29 applied from Hanover, 34 applied from Hanson, 38 applied from Marshfield. And they have 33 seats apportioned to them. So that 20 number that I suggested might be conservative for this first inaugural group. 10 students applied from Norwell, 82 students applied from Rockland, 24 students applied from Situate, and 70 students applied from Whitman. We are in process of we have not yet started acceptances in Abington and Whitman. Amy's working on that right now. So right now, what I'm tracking early is the number of seniors we project to graduate, the number of kids who are saying that they're coming. And I asked Amy to update that number periodically, because while it doesn't matter until Crystal's takes this over in October and puts our state reporting together, it's good forecasting. It's very good for me to be able to say in the summer to town administrators, here's what we're seeing. It looks like your town's gonna be up 6 kids or down 11 kids. So I can get you a more complete answer on that, Bob, but at least with the initial interest. So that total number of applications is probably north of 300. I didn't add the totals together.
Thank you.
That was my question was, no matter what school we decide to build, there's no way we could ever take every applicant.
Yeah, I think, Bob, it's the outside line of that number. Every one of my assumptions would have to be true, and it would be very, very close. There would have to be a 900 student, and we'd have to push that 900. So to reach for that number, that's that's part of our conversation. But at least I want to be able to give you the ceiling and the floor as part of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I wondered what the prioritization might be for an applicant from a town that's not in the district like Hingham.
Sure.
How is it a level playing field for a kid that's from Hingham compared to a kid from Whitman?
There is no level playing field. The preference is for in-district students. The way the regulations read now, George, is we would have to have a school with less than 175 interested in-district kids. So if we only had 150 eighth graders that wanted to come here, now we're back to admitting non-resident kids. So an eighth grader in Hingham who applies here, knowing that we've got 300 plus applicants from our 8, now 9 towns, there's simply no statistical chance. However, that child could apply as a rising sophomore. The policy would be, we're going to look, what program are you interested in? And we would say that if there's no in-district rising sophomore that wants program X, then there's an opportunity. So it's a very narrow window. And so we're serving, the intent of the regulations is to say, serve the need of the demand of your district. And so that's what we're doing. And we're just, as Bob said, we're not able to meet that demand.
Sure, go ahead.
So getting back to what we'd like to have, those numbers that we just talked about, obviously, I'm just making an assumption that when we meet with our towns, they have to see that.
Yes.
We project this many kids would like to come, so even at 900, we couldn't get everybody in. So when we're talking about the towns to get their interest and improve what we're looking for, they have to see those numbers.
They have to know what we've probably told them, but folks need to folks might be tuning into our world here of, you know, considerable demand. And the potential for a design enrollment that we could still enroll more students for that number, but you're right, Tom, that's part of the conversation. That's what we want people to, we want to engage people so that they're aware of that, yeah. That we're gonna build something that there's virtually no chance would be underserved. The only catch I would say is the last slide on my presentation, which was each year that we're building an operating budget, we have to go to our communities and say, I need 4 more teachers for the next 4 years, et cetera. But if we explain, if our communities at least know that we're doing those projections, that's just part of good stewardship, I think, of the business here. Yeah.
To elaborate on that, I was just looking at our town report. We have 20 students graduating from Whitman, right, in the senior. You're saying that we had 70 applicants look at our school to possibly come in from Whitman. So that's the difference of, we can say, okay, we got about 20 in, but 50 left, sorry.
Yes, that's,
Where we are now, I mean, and we're pushing the limit right now with the size school that we have now.
and that's one of the reasons that we're looking at that regional agreement amendment, because what is ultimately gonna happen to historically oversubscribed towns is that, at least for several years, we're gonna have an additional community, greater interest from that community, and there'll be fewer unused seats. So we'll start to see an alignment, and that drop in enrollment from town X,
Yeah,
you know, whether it's Whitman or Rockland or Abington, historically oversubscribed, more demand than seats. If we see a decline in enrollment in those 3 communities, it's not gonna be because of a lack of interest. It's a lack of capacity.
right,
Yeah.
seats.
I agree, yeah,
I mean,
it's a tough
it
one.
leads you to believe that if that's the situation we're in, and we look at the high, you know, the 900 plus students, but that's such a high amount, well, the towns approve that, you know, for that amount. Or do we look at 805 or even less? You know, better to have smaller schools with less students, but have a new school than to have a vote to try and get a larger school and it doesn't pass.
And that's why we're scheduled for the next 2 Thursdays. To be able to unpack this even further.
Right, I mean, that's,
It's a tough one, it is.
right, I mean,
It's not as easy as I thought it was.
right, towns need to understand, you know, the college for vocational schools, and if they want room for their child, a better chance for their child to get a vocational education, we need to get a bigger school. You know, so, and when I think of that, so I think of it is, the movie, Jaws, we need a bigger boat. You know?
The sad part is with that though, again, is that you'll see it in your community, I'm gonna see it at mine, I got 55 families that will be calling my phone,
Right,
wondering why I didn't get in. And but towns, all they're looking at is the budget number,
that's it.
the number, they're not worried about, oh, sorry, Johnny, you don't get to go for vocational education, they don't care. Because if I take 55 kids out of the 82 here, Rockland Heights is gonna be empty.
Right.
Oh,
Sandra has her hand up.
Sandra, go ahead.
Hi, I'm pretty sure I asked this question maybe 6 months ago, and I may have gotten an answer, so forgive me. Have we taken a look at, I have not, so the collective we, taken a look at enrollment trends in each community? So are we looking at static 8th grades, or are we looking at decreased enrollment across a 5 to 10 year period? And how would that impact our decision-making? Something I've been thinking about.
Sandy, the DESI reports for our communities that show some fluctuation, but nothing that, well, Cohasset and Hanson's 8th grade enrollment dropped significantly in this last round of reporting. But it doesn't look like that's something that's permanent. So I didn't see anything that jumped off the page, but I think, you know, in general, we hear that there's, you know, K-12 enrollment is plateaued statewide. I'm not sure how much that would factor in, given that we have, being oversubscribed, even with slightly declining enrollment in our communities, there still is, and you know, there's not a corresponding decline in interest to come to us. So, but it's worth a second look, but from what I saw casually, I didn't see anything that jumped off the page about a significant decline in 6th, 7th grade enrollments.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Everybody sitting there going. Anyway, now it's your turn to tackle us with numbers.
All right, so as Superintendent Hickey mentioned, we will be, next slide, sorry. We kind of kicking off this 3-week, intense review so that maybe we can get to a decision on a single option by February 22nd is the goal. So I figured I would take everyone through just kind of a very quick update on, where we came from, where we are, just to set the stage for any new folks who might be watching this, this recording. So, and a lot of this in the presentation are things you have seen before, so I may speed through a bit and then if you have questions, I can go through it. But as you know, we started out with 5 different enrollments, 645, 750, 805, 900, 975. We voted to, the SBC voted to take off the table the 645, the 750, and the 975 for various reasons. And we also had, 5 design options across those 5 enrollments that were studied at the PDP level. And then during PSR, we expanded that NC 2.0 to include an NC 2.1. So, and those are the 2 new options that are still on the table. So we were down to 6 options. And this slide shows the square footage difference of an 805 to a 900, it shows kind of the total project budget cost of everything, so you can kind of compare at least those 2 enrollments. The square footage does seem to jump between 18,000 and 20,000 between 805 and 900 options, just so that you have that number in your head and thinking about that and how it affects cost. Next slide, sorry, moving forward on my screen. So this next slide, and speaking about those enrollments that we took off the table, and considering there might be some appetite to move back to that 750 or consider other enrollments, I did just want to outline where we are with the schedule now and explain the impacts of expanding back to a 750 or any of the other enrollments on the schedule and some budget constraints. But this committee is, you can vote to reconsider the 750 if you want. That is something you are able to do. So for right now, we are currently, you can see on the left-hand side here, we have submitted the PDP. We are in that light green preferred schematic report area of the slide. We are set to submit the preferred schematic report, or PSR, to the MSBA on February 29th, which is why we would be looking to have that decision by the 22nd so that we had time to wrap up our report and get that in timely. Then we would move full speed ahead into schematic design, and that we would have 6 months to develop that. And that would take us from March. And here you can see there's also an approval from the MSBA for that first package we submit at the end of February. MSBA approves it in April, but the whole time we're still working towards that goal of schematic design and submitting that at the end of August. So that is the timeline to get us to schematic design. From there, we submit that report to MSBA August 29th, and then they would have 2 months to review it and ask questions. There would be back and forth on that. And then they would approve the schematic design submission on at their October 30th Board of Directors meeting. And that's where they would tell us what amount they would be participating in this project. So that's where we get that final go ahead from the MSBA on their portion of the funding. So up until that point, this Tom noted, for comparison purposes only, my favorite line. So at that point, this schedule currently allows us 3 months, November, December, January, to get the word out about all of the options about the project, the budget information, really just to hit the street with that information that we get from the MSBA in late October. And until we have that district-wide ballot at the end of January, tentatively scheduled, I think. So right now, I think the schedule's in great shape. And we have enough time allotted to do everything we want to. Next slide. This is a look at if we put the 750 or any other enrollment back on the table, because as you recall, we did take those off before we submitted to the estimators. So we would need a couple of weeks at least to update drawings and documents for the new enrollment. Then those would have to go to estimators for at least, I'd say 2 weeks at least. So you're looking at, we would miss that February 22nd deadline, February 29th deadline with the MSBA, and would be pushed out. That they only meet every other month, so we'd be pushed out our schedule by 2 months. So we would be then submitting on April 25th, submitting the PSR. They would vote on it at the end of June. And if we were still maintaining those 6 months for schematic design, which we think we would need to, we would be submitting at the end of October in time for their early to mid-December decision. So we wouldn't know what the MSBA's funding and participation would be until right before the holidays. And that seemed like kind of a tight squeeze to then be trying to turn that around over the holidays and get people more aware about the project and the facts of the project. So even this I kind of show at the end of February, which still might feel a little tight. So just wanted to show you that for the schedule perspective, and then what that means. You'll see here, we've kind of taken a rough estimate based on all of the options. This will obviously depend which option is chosen and which price we go with. But escalation is approximately 500,000 to 800,000 a month. So, and right now our costs are based off of a late January vote date and approval. So pushing out to even late February would increase the total project budget of each of the options by $500,000 to $800,000. Just eyes wide open if you make that decision. And there's a balance there. So, if we would need to run additional estimates with our estimators and involve other consultants to bring these options up to speed, we would be looking at approximately 10,000 to 15,000 in the feasibility study funds, which we have available. So that's not really a concern with feasibility study funds if we made that decision. But again, with all the information that's going to be coming to you, and and we'll be discussing over the next few weeks, this is an option. I just wanted to make sure everyone's eyes were wide open on what it means. Yes. Next slide. And then we will have kind of a summary slide for each of the options of the pros and cons. You've seen these in the form of the evaluation matrix, which will pop up again at the end, but I did want to just kind of highlight what's in there. And then we have an update on the ad reno and some phasing and logistics right after this slide. So for addition renovation, we've identified advantages being the lowest initial cost. Can't get around that. That's right in front of you. Lowest initial cost according to these estimates. You get a higher MSBA reimbursement rate at the end of the day because you're reusing some of the school. There is a minimal change to site layout and therefore less visual impact for abutters. There are a bunch of disadvantages. This is obviously the most disruptive. At the top here, you can see it's 52 months of construction time do an addition renovation, because kids would need to stay in the building. You'd need to get some modular, units to move kids around a little bit. Carl will show you some creative scheduling with, doing some of it over the summers and things like that, but this would be construction happening while learning is happening. So it would be disruptive. Because of the reuse of the existing building, there is an inability to achieve the programmatic adjacencies that are laid out in the educational program. So can't move spaces around as you would like to with a new construction building. This is the least future flexible option because of that, the reuse of the existing building. So as Superintendent Hickey had mentioned, those the ability to flex beyond the design enrollment. There's a little bit less of an ability to do that with a renovation because you're reusing some of what you have now. And so just imagine trying to fit more kids in the spaces you have now. So it'd be slightly less future flexible than a new building would be. This is going to be the least energy efficient building because you are, again, reusing the existing. A lot of it comes down to reusing the existing building and envelope. And because it is the least energy efficient, it is also going to be the higher in operational costs of the options. There's no additional site amenities. It would be a very similar layout to what you have now. These would be upgraded throughout the project, but same real site layout, same site circulation, same area for parking, things like that. Because we're using the existing building, there really is a shorter building life expectancy, at least for that portion of the building. And there's higher risk at the place where the buildings, the new and the old connect. So that can become an issue sooner than it would, in a new construction building where you would expect the full 50+ years for that new construction to last. There is a likelihood of additional unforeseen costs during construction due to the age of the existing building. So the costs that we have in there now, I think that looking at some of the unit rates and things that carried, I think there should be a little more cushion that might be added to those numbers to really reflect some of this risk. Opening up a building, any renovation, you never know what you're gonna get. So here I've also carried over the costs and the square footage comparison that you've seen. You're probably very familiar with those numbers by now. So with that, next slide, to hand it off to Carl to talk through the phasing and logistics.
Thanks. We thought it would be helpful to sort of put some graphics with the analysis when we were talking about, how an addition renovation option is more disruptive, or why it takes longer, construction time, and some of those issues. We've put together some more specific kind of logistics as to how, and again, on a very preliminary basis, how an addition renovation might happen here. The first phase we called early site preparation. We have to bring in some modular classrooms to replace the spaces that would be lost to the construction zone in front of the building. So it's that front wing of the building. There are, I think, 3 classrooms. There's the student services suite, there's the administrative suite, and there's allied health. So all those spaces would be displaced into modulars. And then there's also where the science labs are in this option, because the current science labs really are nowhere near standard in terms of size. They're going to be replaced as part of this. They would also be relocated to modular. So we've shown the modular location kind of by the greenhouse behind the school in an area where we would also recommend ultimately, when the modulars go away, that becomes additional parking lot. There's a slope there down to the athletic field. If you put in a retaining wall, we could gain, I think it's something like 35 parking spaces there, which are going to be needed here, no matter which enrollment you choose, actually. This first one shows just that construction happening. We don't know when in the calendar it would happen. Obviously, it'd be great if most of it could be in the summer when there's not as much activity here of bringing in those modulars. They need a path to get in there and the workers to assemble them, even though they're prefabricated elsewhere. There's a fair amount of site work still to hook them up. Particularly, they'll have plumbing connections and so forth. This plan also shows that if we were to adopt that option of building off of Main Street for some additional either parking or other uses, it might come in handy because as you'll see as we go through this, there's going to be a displacement of your existing parking to a construction zone, and either you're going to have to sort of enforce that the students, not as many students can drive to school, and you'll have, just enough spaces for the faculty and staff, or else we need to find some additional parking on site. So that's one option that this is counting on. And the connection between that parking and the school is just a pedestrian path. That's not drivable necessarily in this case. So that's the first phase. It also calls for building a new road right by this house. The new exiting driveway there, because as you'll see, we can go to the next one. So that becomes the construction zone right there, phase one, we call it. And the contractor will be able to drive directly in off Webster Street into a fenced-in area at what's now the front of the school. But the school, by developing that new driveway and continuing to use the existing driveway entrance, will still have the ability to drive around the school and access the back of the school, have buses circulate around, have cars and deliveries make it around it, and so forth. But the real activity, this is the major sort of construction zone first. I'm sorry, you went to phase two. You gotta go back to phase one. There we go. It is the construction of all the addition, or the major part. There's still some smaller additions, but the major addition to the building, which basically wraps around the current gym in an L shape, as we've called it. And so that whole area will be under construction probably for the better part of 18 months to 24 months in front there. And the modulars will be in use for that time period. The students would make connection to the modulars probably through the end of the automotive wing there. The corridor goes straight out to the back. It would be open, not a covered walkway because we still need to drive around there. But it's not a very big gap there between, and the weather's not too bad to make that connection. But the other thing that gets displaced, I did mention, are the locker rooms on either side of the gym too. Would be displaced during this time period, and we're showing next to the current football locker rooms that perhaps we'd add some modulars there for additional locker rooms there too, and those students too would sort of jog across the parking lot to enter the building as well, to make use of the existing gym, which is still available. The gym and the cafeteria remain available to the students during this first construction phase. But the contractor's occupying the entire front of the school. That's where they would set up their trailers. That's where they would, set up their deliveries and lay down space and so forth. They'll need a crane at some point. They may need to get around the building too. They may not be able to reach it all from the front. That's there's a lot of subtleties here and details that would need to be worked out. This is still very high level, but and so you can see during this time period, the school still can circulate kind of in a dead end fashion now. You can no longer make the connection that it more or less is the way it is today, that you go from a new main entrance, which would be by Culinary and Cosmo, and perhaps you take a little corner of the restaurant and put some administrative people in there, obviously for security, to kind of administer that entrance, so that there'd be some visitor parking by the front door directly off Webster Street. And you could probably still have customers come to cosmetology and maybe a smaller restaurant. Those are the kinds of disruptions, to education as well as, to just day-to-day learning that would have to be accommodated here. But that's one, way of thinking about it. So this first phase, as we said, would last for the better part of a year and a half. And probably try to do as much as you can during the summers as well, but obviously it's gonna continue over a couple school years. Then next phase, once that new wing comes, it now is available for use, so it all in the beige color now. We'd start, working with a construction manager again, trying to allocate portions of the school that could be taken offline, because certain spaces could now be relocated to the new construction. You've gained some space in the building that way, and you're continuing to use the modulars. So maybe, one wing, like the 92 wing there, could be, literally given over to the contractor for a certain number of months. It may be a semester, it may be 6 months, something like that. And try to do as much as you can in certain spaces, like cosmetology and culinary, which are hard to relocate to someplace else temporarily. Try and do those in so-called summer slammers, as contractors call them, where they might even work double shifts and to try to take advantage of July and August and get as much done as they can. And then it just sort of continues now as you work around the school. We'll go to the next phase, Crystal. So that, wing would be complete, you tackle another wing of the building. And again, it might be a different time period, but it's gonna be some period during the school year. And you'd still try to do things, particularly the gym and cafeteria renovation and kitchen, and try to do as much of those spaces as you can in the summer, because there's no real easy relocation of those spaces. And fortunately, in the new construction, remember in this option, we're building a new gym over the locker rooms. So the renovation, the conversion of that gym is into a multi-purpose auditorium space. But we still want to try and get the cafeteria and kitchen online. And so that would be the focus of some summer work. And perhaps renovating the fields might be done some summer too. That's kind of a independent project almost of renovating. The configuration is not going to change much, but just to improve the surfaces and the drainage and so forth. We want to find some off period to do that. Next phase, again, just working around the building, might be, the backside there, the carpentry and metal fab and classroom wing. And again, to maintain circulation around the building, some students might use the courtyard and go across there. That's what the blue arrow is and so forth. But there are a lot of details that, would be worked out in coordination with administration, of course. The construction managers would have certain ideas and certain needs, but we obviously always want to involve the administration and what makes sense and the instructors and so forth. So, that lays out kind of 4 phases. And that's one reason we think, the construction period would take as long as it would. And then somewhere in there, we have to build a new wastewater treatment plant and upgrade the leaching field that's in the front yard, right along Webster Street there. So that's a bit of a challenge too, but that has to get done. We don't know exactly when in the process. It's really triggered by adding more students. So I don't know exactly when during this construction process you would actually start accepting more students. That would be something you'd want to think about too. But that's when the treatment plant, probably from a permitting point of view, would have to come online when we exceed the current 670 students. So those are some of the issues that, at a very high level, a very preliminary level, would have to be dealt with in addition renovation. And that's why in our scorecard and in the listing that Ben just gave you, these kinds of things are summarized in words, but we thought some pictures would help too, so you'd understand what's involved in one of these projects.
Anybody have any questions on that?
There's one more slide too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Bob. Just to explain, I don't know if you noticed in the summary there, for comparative purposes, only summary of costs. You might have noticed that the square footage for the addition renovation, the total square footage after all is said and done, is still a little bit lower than the comparable sizes for new construction. And the reason for that is because even though everything we build new will meet new standards, the classrooms, the shops and all, there are gonna be some spaces highlighted in red here that in the addition renovation remain as is. And they're a little bit smaller than what you would otherwise have in new construction. That's why when we were talking about where's the elasticity in the enrollments, you know, if you've got classrooms that are large enough, you know, sometimes you put 20 kids in, you can easily put 25. Well, in here, when you already have classrooms that are a little bit smaller, you know, these are like 750, and the new classrooms are 850. You could, you know, get a few more students in and have that flexibility. You don't have as much flexibility here when you're preserving some existing classrooms, because it really doesn't pay to take down walls, just to move them a couple feet to gain. So typically in a renovation, we would accept that. I mean, obviously you could, you know, it would change the price tag, but you know, and it would extend the time to actually try to reconstruct those and take, you know, what are now 3 classrooms and make them 2 or something. And the other spaces, you know, the multi-purpose auditorium there is identified to become the library. And it's, again, it's substandard just from a, you know, the floor point of view, but also the size point of view. It's not the same size, but it's an existing space. It seemed to make sense in this overall option to leave it. That's why when you add up those differences, you know, the addition renovation option is somewhere, I think it's 6,000 or 7,000 square feet total, less than the same, you know, for either the 900 or the 805 or even 750, whichever one you compare with, it's always a little bit lower in total square footage. Just to, again, put a picture to those words that you had.
Go ahead.
Okay?
This is 52 months,
Total.
okay, and if you went brand new, is it more or less than 52 months?
Well, to get the building, we were saying that the construction of the building is probably somewhere in the vicinity of 30 months. And then the additional time is you have to demolish the existing building and build the fields. And that's depending on the seasons. It could be another 6 months, could be another 8 to 10 months, something like that. So it's at least a year difference between the 2 options, George. Yeah.
I have on the ad reno. I have found in the past with building projects in the town of Whitney, in some of our schools, we've had ad renos. And, for some particular reason, there's always something that got missed and it's leaking, and eventually we have a middle school that we did an ad reno, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the way it was done. Now we need to do it with Patton Middle School. We have a couple of 2 elementary schools that, since we eliminated 1 elementary school, we had to do ad renos on those 2 elementary schools. One has a roof project problem now and is leaking. So for some reason, when you do an addition, you know, and you renovate the old and add an addition, sometimes if it's not done right, it doesn't last. That's why I'm not kind of in favor of it.
One of the real examples there is underslab plumbing pipes.
Yeah,
We can, you know, on your behalf, we can hire someone to put a camera in there and we can try and assess the condition of them. But then if you have to dig them up, now you're taking out the entire floor slab.
right.
We don't have that price in this renovation
Right.
here. So those are the kinds of things that even if everything else is brand new above the slab, you're
Right.
still depending on those. They're not gonna last 50 years.
That's the
probably.
issue I have with the ad reno.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and I probably would not vote on ad reno.
Tom, what time do you have your meeting in Old?
Thank you, Bob. Justin, did we get bumped on the
We
agenda?
did get bumped. If we could leave here probably by 7:25, 7:30 at the latest, that would be best for us.
The meeting can continue, certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just
No.
Thank you for asking.
want to.
Mr. Chairman, if we could be excused by 7:25, that would be wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, certainly, man.
I had a thought about the ad rental.
Go ahead.
And it's the expression lipstick on a pig.
Well, it's like fixing, to me, it's like repairing an old car.
Yeah.
You do a lot of good things to it, but you still have an old car.
Yeah.
Hanover did an ad rental on the elementary school, but the difference was it was all to the right-hand side. They did everything off to this side, repaired this and that there, so there hasn't been an issue, but on one side's a 1955 elementary school, and the other side is new. Oh, what?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment back up to what Kyle was saying about the underground piping. What I can say from my experience currently is that piping does need to be replaced. We have been, putting patches in certain areas to make things work currently. So that should be something that should not be overlooked. And it sounds like that it's something that's not built into this price. So I think we need to seriously consider building that in, or at least adding it into the pricing, so that we can have a more realistic look if we're going to be looking at an ad reno option.
Thank you, Bob, I appreciate
That's
that.
just one item.
Yeah,
Piping, that's one item. It could be more down the line.
yeah, that's,
You mentioned the mod units. How many mod units you think you're gonna need?
That was another thing that we were probably a little aggressive on in the pricing. I think we priced something like 10,000 square feet of mods. We really think you need almost twice that, 20,000, looking at it a little closer.
Yeah.
To do those classrooms, office space, allied health spaces, so 20,000 square feet.
And how many of those would be 1,000 square foot per mod?
What's a typical mod is they come like, half and half, and you put them together to make two classrooms. It takes two mods, but they're long and thin, so they're not, an individual classroom by itself. So generally, you end up with something that's, I forget what the longest is that they can travel over the road, something, like 50 feet or 55 feet and 14 feet wide or something like that, is one.
Special.
Yeah, and you put two together and you get a 28-foot bay and, a classroom. And what we've drawn in that, if you go back to one of the site plans, Crystal, it is roughly that size. It's something like 65 feet wide and 250 feet long or something like that. That's about how much you need.
And do you have like an idea, just a ballpark of what the cost would be for those?
9.3 million is what we have in there now.
How much?
We have 9.3 million in the estimates right now for modulars.
and you don't get back.
That you don't get.
Right,
don't-
and it's
and you
no
don't get
MSBA
value.
support
I
either.
mean, you can finance it a different way, where you can own them in the end if you want, or resell them.
This question may have been answered before, but does MSBA support that?
No.
So that would come out of our.
That's one of the things that, it's a kind of a hidden thing that, one of our criteria, we talk about, how much of the cost goes to something that gives you permanent value.
Yeah.
With the addition renovation, you're spending money on modulars, you're spending money on moving things and storing things, none of that's reimbursable, unfortunately. So, and it doesn't give you permanent value.
And that covers classrooms, not shops, so
Yeah.
you can't get a modular for a shop.
Right.
Kind of answers my question. All right, what do we got next?
So I just have the new construction options. Yes, so I have this is NC 2.0, that's where the locker room and everything is a little bit closer to the fields, as you'll recall. The advantages, this is the best adherence to the educational plan as it was laid out. It provides all the spaces that are in there, it provides all the adjacencies that you'd want between programs. It's as with the other new construction option as well, it is future flexible as the spaces are right sized. So you do have that flex that was in Tom's chart earlier. It does allow for that future growth past just the design enrollment as we're just, as what we're calling it now. As you can see at the top, we're getting the top part of the slide, this would be 30 months for the building construction. And as Carl noted, you'd need another year at least to take down the old building and then put the site amenities in. This also, this would be a highly efficient building because it is all new construction. So you would expect lower operational costs over the life of this building versus an ad reno, and definitely versus what you have now. There would be upgraded site circulation. We have reviewed the site options many times, and those site options for the new construction. So that would be what you would be getting: better bus and car parking, better pickup drop off, which would take the impact off of Webster Street. There's just better community use and access to the building and to the parts of the building that could be used by the community. There's better connection to the locker rooms field, as I mentioned earlier. Disadvantages, this does limit because of the site constraints and the size of a new construction build at either 805 or 900. There's limited building expansion possible in the future. If you wanted to build do an ad reno in 25, 30 years, there's limits to that on site. The athletic fields and parking are closest to the street. That could be an advantage or a disadvantage, depending on what kind of civic presence you're looking for from that street. There would be limited access to site amenities during construction. So there could be, once we're looking at phasing and things, some of the parking could shift and things like that around the site while the contractor would be building. So there are logistical challenges on the site level that would need to be explored a little more for new construction. But we still don't feel they're as much of an impact as an ad reno as that would actually impact day-to-day learning. At the bottom here, you can see again, estimated total project budget and estimated district share for each 805 and 900. Walk over that as you've seen it. The NC 2.1, a lot of the same advantages. It would be around the same construction time frame, 30 months for the building, about a year after that for the site and everything. Again, it's really all of those same advantages. Some of the disadvantages, again, limited building expansion opportunities. There's the athletic fields are close to the street, limited access to site amenities, as I just mentioned. This is also the larger of the two new construction options based on where things have laid out. There's just more corridor and things like that needed, so it's slightly more square footage and therefore a little less efficient in layout and a little bit more in cost because of that additional square footage. It's also there's a less ideal and less secure location for an outdoor lunch situation. This puts that kind of right at the front of the building as opposed to NC 2.0, which puts it at the back. I believe this also, based on the layout, has a little bit of a less desirable location for the gym and the locker rooms, as it relates to the fields. And again, the cost differences here. And next, sorry. And this is that chart that we were talking about and that you've seen before. I think everyone has it in like a nice full printout, but I have it on 2 slides here. And this just this is a lot of the same pros and cons both of us just covered. You can see here, we also have something I'll mention in another cost slide in a moment. We have this code renovation upgrade slide or option as well. It doesn't address any of the educational needs. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't change finishes inside the building. It's not a renovation per se. It's more behind the walls, above the ceiling money that's being spent to just bring the building up to code. So we have to explore that for the MSBA purposes. They don't participate in the funding of it, but it is a good comparison to say if we don't do anything at this stage, we might not have to spend that money right away, but it would be something that needs to be spent over time to bring the building just up to code, to current codes. So we'll talk about that cost in a moment. But this is that evaluation matrix. And the next slide also has some more. So if you are, between now and your next meeting, just take a look and see, compare against each other there. Next slide. And now back to the cost slides. You've seen this one before. And so you've seen this slide before. This is the ad reno options in the dark green on the left with 805 and 900. Those middle options are NC 2.0, 805 and 900. And the ones all the way to the right in the light green are NC 2.1. Like I said, we've seen this slide, so this is just a comparison showing estimated construction costs, how that's escalated up to estimated project costs, and then possible MSBA share, and then therefore the district share. And the next three slides, again, you've seen these ones, and for comparison purposes only on all of these cost slides. But we've added in what we would expect. We basically took what we have for PDP for the 645 and the 750. Those drawings had not been refined in any way from PDP. We took those square footages and applied an updated cost per square foot. For ad reno, I'll have a slide in a minute that kind of talks to why there's such a huge difference between like a 750 and that 805 number, even though it's just a difference of 55 students and the enrollment. But so these slides you've seen, that's what those are. And next, I keep forwarding on my slides. I forget to press it. Sorry, Crystal. And next one. Yes, that's this one. Yes. Sorry. Oh, that's probably a good idea. Awesome, thank you. Okay, so this slide shows the 645, the 750, the 805, the 900. Up at the top left here, you can see option one, the code upgrade. It would be an estimated total project budget cost of around $110 million. No MSBA participation. Again, it's all, upgrades in the walls, above the ceiling, maybe some floor things to bring up the ADA accessibility. But it's not money you see, and it just brings it up to today's code. So back to the 645, I'm showing the ad reno option, the new construction 2.0 and 2.1. And I've got the square footage here just to kind of explain the ad reno a little better and the differences between what happened in PDP and PSR, and why the costs between the 645, 750, especially in ad reno, are not apples to the 805 and 900 that we have for PSR. So here you can see in PDP, these were the square footage that we had for a new building, for reno, the new portion of the building, and for the renovated portion of the building. And so for PDP, across all options, actually, it was assumed that we would be renovating 108,000 square feet of the existing building. In the assumptions for 800 and 900, when we moved into PSR and refined the drawings and figured out what was actually possible, we were looking at more of a renovation for 112-ish thousand across those two options. So we had increased the amount of square footage that would be renovated. So that is part of the, that's part of why this is not apples to apples, especially for the ad reno, because when you look across the new construction options, while there might be a shift in some of the square footage, it really is easier to make an assumption that it's new construction, this is what we're building, this is what it is, as opposed to how do I kind of shoehorn this program into this building in the best way. So you can see here, I kind of tried to show what kind of an increase there is between each option going across. And this is the total project budget estimated costs here. So you see and I've also got the square footage, so you can see how that also grows across the options. So 645 is the smallest square footage, we're just looking at, NC 2.1. You know, have a 249 million, and then that steps up to 750. And again, these were PDP square footages, not that they may have changed too much moving into PSR, but the 805 and the 900 numbers are much more refined. So I just wanted to kind of break that down and kind of explain that jump, that major jump between specifically the ad reno 750 and 805. That's, I think, a lot of that, and I think also what Carl was mentioning, that there are still some unknowns that we would probably need to add to the estimate for the ad reno option. So not apples to apples necessarily. Like I mentioned, the difference between the NC options. All right, and this is the taxpayer breakdown that I had sent out. I sent out 2 taxpayer breakdown sheets. One was for a level debt service, one was for a level principal service across, both were 30% email, sorry.
Have you sent it? No?
Yeah, it's gone.
And so both of them were 30 years, and at 3.75%. This is all assumptions at this point. This is obviously would be something that needed to be worked out, during the tail end of schematic design to figure out exactly, how the project would be funded. So this, I'm just showing for tonight's purposes, just showing the level principal, because that would be a higher payment for the first 12 to 13 years, but a lower payment overall of the life of the bond. So this is kind of worst case scenario, so I figured I'd present that, as opposed to the worst case scenario for the taxpayer, as opposed to the level debt, which would be a higher cost over the life of the loan, but lower upfront payments for the first 12 to 13 years, depending on the option. So to break that down, this option shows the 645 and the 750 that are obviously currently off the table, but just so that when you're looking at this between now and the next meeting, you have those numbers as well. But just to focus in on the options that are on the table, you can see here the options across the top, the enrollments across the top, the total project budget, the district's assumed share, estimated total bond amount, and then a breakdown of what the first year payment would be, which would be the highest because it would then slowly drop off over the 30 years. So these tax rates are the ones that have been used. And this is what you can see across. You can kind of look across an option for Abington, for instance, an ad reno for 805 at 319-ish, and then an ad reno for 900 at 336. For new construction 2.0, you have 805 is 363, and the increase between those two options would actually you'd have the same cost of tax according to the tax calculator from mass.gov.
Jen, if I could just interject,
Yes,
just briefly, as we're looking at those numbers, the plan for rolling whatever we are able to do to taxpayers would be with an initial short-term borrowing in fiscal 26. If we had to borrow $20 million to go deeper into design, the interest on that would be $700,000 or $800,000. So this is making it simplified. It's kind of raising the bar, but this is making the assumption that the full amount of the borrowing were to happen all at once. So while it doesn't change these numbers, the numbers you see here, level principal, would probably not get to that point until fiscal 29. Fiscal 26 would be that short-term borrowing. then we probably roll that into a bond about 60% of it in fiscal '27, 90% of it in fiscal '28, and then the full amount. So it still arrives there, but we've seen too many charts tonight, we didn't want to do that, right? So this just assumes, okay, here's the project, that's gonna be the highest watermark, but it'll ramp up over a few years till the culmination of the construction.
And to that point, we would also, once we have the MSBA's, once we have the schematic design budget, we would also be taking a look at what the MSBA reimbursement would be during the course of the project to help figure out when those bonds need to happen.
And that's because we're getting reimbursed as we're spending money.
Right,
And
exactly.
there's a way to adjust for that.
Right. So, thank you, Mel.
Go ahead. Question, so all these numbers are just based on the 34% from MSBA?
Yes, this is the, double check those numbers, but
So-
this is the, yes, based on district share.
Okay, so going back to that there, when will we, just, going up and raising a flag, these towns said it's gonna be this. And if our percentage goes up, then we're just gonna come back and say, now we look like the nicer guy. But we've already just raised the flag that you get everybody being negative about it now. Because of the numbers that they get shocked, sticker shock. And then rather than just waiting before we go to the towns and say, this is what it's gonna be, and this is our definite number. Because right now, we're just getting all negative press from, in my town, especially Rockland, but I just don't see, I know we have to go through this process, but I just still wanna know when this MSBA gonna give us the final thing to that.
Yes, so once we, at the end of the schematic design, that's when we'll have our budget, and we submit that budget to the MSBA with the report, slightly earlier than the report. And that's when they come back, after they review everything that we've submitted, they take a look at square footages, things that they will deem ineligible or eligible. And at the end of that, they'll say, okay, here's your new reimbursement rate. And this is our maximum total grant amount, and then we can apply it.
On our current schedule, that's like August.
So will that be before the vote?
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
well before the vote.
Yes.
Okay.
And the other caveat, Bob, I just add is these numbers that we're looking at do not factor in Marshfield. If we go with the earlier assumptions about Marshfield, again, if they added 20 kids a year, I'm using 10 to 12% as a conservative number. Any of those numbers, I would like to suggest you could easily knock off 10 to 12%. Because there will be cost sharing. There's no question, there will be some, these numbers won't be the final numbers. We'll wait till the end of schematic design. All of these will be rerun, and we finally won't have slides with 8 columns on them. But we certainly will have a reduction.
But if we send that out to the public now, they'll be like, $425 to $500, I mean, you just say, why are we paying $500?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to excuse myself from this meeting. I would just like to bring up one point. These numbers are great. I love slides as much as the next guy, let me tell you, I do. One thing I think is abundantly clear to me is that we have 3 options in front of us. We have the Adveno 2.0 and 2.1. I can't sit here and say that 2.1 really makes a whole lot of sense to me to continue to discuss it further. I'm not calling for a vote or making a motion for that right now, obviously, because of the time that I have to leave. I would just implore the other members of the committee, here or virtually, to think about that the next time that we meet, that to make this process easier for us, it might be time to take 2.1 out of the equation permanently and focus on the Adveno and 2.0, because those to me seem like the actual legitimate options that we should spend our time discussing. And that's all I have to say, sir.
Yeah, wonderful, well put. Have a good time.
Thank you, guys. Everyone, please. Yeah, see you guys next week.
I think that's,
Sorry, folks.
that was it. So I'm open for questions.
Anybody have any other questions? Go ahead, Tim.
Mr. Chairman, on 2.0 or 2.1, you have a 30-month construction time, but What's the timing for the students to get in the new build and into the new buildings? I mean, we don't worry about the fields and the demo, you know, from shovel to kids being in the new building, what is that time frame?
Yeah, we think the 30 months is about right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then 12 months on top of that for,
For finish, yeah.
Because I didn't know if the 30 months included the demo and the fields.
it should be.
That's fairly conservative too, I think, too, but,
Yeah.
okay.
And we can, I don't know if you sent out those copies.
I sent the taxpayer information, but I'll send this so
Send it.
that you have it.
Yeah,
Yes,
because I
absolutely.
think everybody's gonna have to sit down,
Sure.
maybe with a little libation.
Yes.
And, you know, go over them because there's a lot there.
Oh, yeah.
But I think we're,
You're just gonna have to
now,
get an
we're getting there.
surprises, just like he said,
We have,
steps in the whole car.
we all love the school. We all love the school, but we have another master behind us, the town, that we have to answer to.
I still think that
So it's, I know where I wanna be, I don't know if I can. There's a lot of things,
A lot of ways.
yeah,
Sorry, Dan, just trying to listen.
Sorry.
So,
so. Other than that,
Mhm.
we're all set.
Yes, yes.
Anybody have anything else? Now that Tom left, we can leave.
I'll entertain a motion, sorry. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Next meeting will be February 15th of 2024. I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Cohasset,
Second.
roll call vote, Bob Hayward, yes. Tom Hickey's gone, Sandy Baldwin,
Yes.
George Cooney,
Yes.
Jim Coughlin,
yes.
Bob Mahoney,
Yes.
Jack Manning,
Yes.
Robert Mello,
Yes.
Frank Mola,
Yes.
Tom Petroselli,
Yes.
Dan Salvucci,
Yes.
and I didn't see Keith Boyle, is he on there?
No.
Okay, motion carries, this meeting is adjourned. Is